can't even fucking sleep, man. I'm disgusted by this. That's how y'all do the homie? In his own city, in his own hood, at his own place of business. That's how do niggas, man. LA on some bullshit, homie, on me.
When Nipsey Hussle got shot in front of his own store in LA, the hip-hop community and much of the music industry were shocked to the bone.
Grammy-nominated rapper Nipsey Hussle was killed in a shooting outside his clothing store in Los Angeles.
Bear with me, y'all. I'm trying to stay strong for the homeboy Nip right now. Stay down with me. Stay down with me.
But if you knew anything about the city where he got shot, you wouldn't have been shocked, because this wasn't the first, second, or last time Los Angeles would drag a talented rapper 6 feet under.
A Los Angeles-based rapper has died following a stabbing at a music festival in Exposition Park.
Police say 20-year-old rapper Pop Smoke, whose real name was Bashar Jackson, was shot and killed just after 4 a.m. in the Hollywood Hills.
Rapper and Philadelphia native PNB Rock has died after he was shot inside a Los Angeles restaurant during an apparent robbery.
All 3 of these tragic deaths happened right after Nipsey's painful exit. And what's probably most alarming is that these are just the ones we know. These are the popular rappers, the ones that make the headlines. Truth is, the city of Los Angeles has become a death trap for any rapper that's on the path to success. So what the hell is happening? What is so different about this city? And why do rappers always die in LA?
Everybody in here, everybody stand up on their feet first and foremost, please. No, don't make no noise.
Before anyone says anything, let's get one thing straight. LA is not the only city that's been killing its rappers. The whole rodeo with rappers dying left, right, and center has been a national pandemic in almost every major entertainment city since Tupac and Biggie died in the mid to late 90s. Tupac died in Las Vegas.
Every brother in here, please take your hat off. At 7:03 p.m. New York time, 4:03 p.m. Las Vegas time, Tupac Shakur passed away, y'all.
And Biggie died in LA.
It's been 25 years since the murder of Notorious B.I.G. and a drive-by shooting on an LA street rocked the music industry to its core. A quarter of a century later, the slaying remains officially unsolved, a case steeped in conspiracy theories and alleged cover-up.
But while Las Vegas has since seen a steep decline in the death of rappers in its city, Los Angeles has just gotten worse. It is so bad that of the 90 rappers that have been killed in the U.S. since 1987, 8 have been killed in Los Angeles. And if you include the cities of Compton and Inglewood, that total jumps up to at least 11. That's like 13% of all rapper deaths in the country in just one city. And just like I said earlier, these are just the rappers we know of, the rappers that were mainstream enough to make the news. Truth is, the real figure is much, much higher than anyone would care to admit, but that's not even what's crazy. The crazy part is that ever since the death of Nipsey Hussle, the number of rapper deaths has been on a wicked rise. 4 out of those 11 deaths that I just mentioned happened after Nip was tragically gunned down. In fact, 3 out of those 4 post-Nipsey murders happened roughly within 1 month. The first was on the 8th of December 2021. Rapper Slim 400 was sitting in his vehicle in Inglewood when an unknown gunman ambushed and gunned him down.
Inglewood police searching for a suspect in the death of an up-and-coming rapper from Compton.
Police say the victim was gunned down on the street here behind me late last night.
They found a man lying on the ground. He was rushed to the hospital where he later died.
What makes Slim's passing more tragic is the fact that just 2 years before his murder, he had survived a shooting attempt on his life where another unknown assailant had shot him 9 times. Unfortunately, this time he wasn't as lucky. The second rapper death happened 11 days after Slim 400's murder, and this time it was Drakeo the Ruler, a South LA underdog, that was the victim. Drakeo, who had famously beaten a life sentence in court, was jumped and stabbed to death shortly before taking the stage at an LA music festival. The third and final death took place on the 9th of January of the next year, 2022, exactly a month after the death of Slim 400. The victim was Earl Swavey. Swavey was a protege of the late ASAP Yams and was driving a car carrying multiple passengers when someone shot him from the back outside a party in downtown Los Angeles. The bullet was found lodged in his heart. Now, I know there's a lot of violence on these streets and that many of these rappers already lived rough, violent lives before their careers took off. But you can say the same about Philly, Detroit, Atlanta, and every other city where rappers thrive. So why is the mortality rate for rappers much higher in Los Angeles than those cities just mentioned? Well, the answer is both simple and complicated. The simple answer is gang culture. Since 1930, Los Angeles has been considered the gang capital of America's street gang. No other city in the US even comes close. If you paid the city a visit today and deliberately took a census of its gangs, you'd find that there are at least 450 distinct gang cells with approximately 100 120,000 members. That's more than enough to cripple a small country, enough to render a state unlivable. And yet all of that is in the city of Los Angeles. It's so bad that Latin American drug cartels have as many as 100,000 foot soldiers in the Los Angeles area, something I have come to call criminality by proxy. I mean, you could practically rename LA from the city of angels to the city of crime, and no one would even flinch. And that's because it's true. Los Angeles might have shaped the culture of hip-hop in more ways than we can be thankful for, producing some of the greatest sounds, artists, and eras, but it has also turned into a cesspool for shifty individuals, violent crimes, and grisly murders. Unfortunately, rappers tend to be the easiest targets, shiny objects that everyone wants to get at.
Telling somebody the other day that to be a rap artist is the most dangerous job in the world.
Why you say that? Wow, okay.
Why I say that?
Yeah.
It's more dangerous than going to war in Iraq. Because you're always on defense. You don't know who's who. People can get right up on you and try to do something to you. You're always getting into beef. How many times we heard rappers, tour buses get shot up this week?
Now, I don't know about the whole Iraq comparison, but Jim Jones is spot on with his argument about rap being a high-risk profession. The moment you make it, you're ops. Quadruple, and you stack random enemies, most of whom you've probably never even met. But while you and I can have enemies without having to fear for our lives, many of the rappers, especially the ones in LA, cannot afford that luxury. It's a city with 120,000 gang members. What do you expect? Even if you stayed in your lane without beefing with anyone, the very nature of the gangs and how they operate would mean you automatically have ops whether you are in a gang or not. All you need to do is be within the same city with them. That's all. But you see, this is where the problem lies. Most rappers in LA are gangbangers themselves, especially those born and bred in LA. YG and Kendrick are Westside Peru, Snoop Dogg and Roddy Ricch are Crips. I can't say this for every one of them, but I can comfortably say that when you grow in an LA project, it's difficult not to represent. Because if you do not have the protection of one gang, you are fair game for all gangs. But don't get me wrong, affiliations are not bulletproof. And more than rivals, what often takes out these rappers the most is jealousy within the ranks. Because who's more dangerous than a rival gang member that you consider your enemy? Well, a fellow gang member who's secretly your enemy but poses as your friend.
Here is exclusive video from Air 7 as the suspect, 29-year-old Eric Holder, is picked up by LAPD detectives at the sheriff's station in Lakewood. He was placed in an unmarked vehicle. The department says it received help from the community to track him down.
Eric Holder and Nipsey Hussle were in the same gang, the Rolling 60s. They might not have been close friends, but they knew each other well enough. However, the most important connection between Eric and Nip was that they were both rappers, but only one of them had a Grammy nomination. Do you see where I'm going with this? There's a Bible verse that goes, "A prophet has no honor in his hometown." Now watch as I switch it up to "A rapper has no honor in his hometown," and see how the message remains the same. It's true for almost every human on earth, but in Los Angeles, the phenomenon is on steroids. Human beings are jealous by nature. We got competition in our blood, and while some of us can control that dark part of ourselves, most people cannot. And so they just devolve into what can be best described as crab mentality. Crab mentality is a mindset where you don't want to see anyone else succeed, even when it doesn't affect you. The term comes from real experiments with crabs in a bucket, where the moment one crab tries to escape the bucket they are all trapped in, another crab will pull it back in. A lot of the so-called homies behave this way anytime one of theirs begins to succeed. Think about it for a second. You grow up in a hood you never left your whole life. You're surrounded by homies that know your mama, your home, know when you bruised your knees running in diapers, and know the teacher that smacked the black off you in grade school. When you got homies that were once high school mates with you, and suddenly you begin to experience more success than them, what do you expect? They'll behave like crabs in a bucket.
It's a crab in a bucket mentality, where, you know what I mean, everybody getting better. So when one person starts to move forward and you know, become a little bit successful, but you still within reach of these people, it's very hard, because, you know, you're dealing with the pressures of trying to be successful, as well as the pressure of people intentionally waking up to try to bring harm your way.
Some of them will envy you. Some will resent you deeply and not even want to relate with you. Some of them will even try to sabotage you. But when you are an LA native, the stakes tend to be a lot more deadly. And it's because gang culture is ingrained in the city's psyche. So instead of pulling you back into the bucket, some will be happy to make sure you can never try to climb out that bucket ever again. This is why rappers like Boosie fled his own hometown, the notorious Baton Rouge in Louisiana. He fled for Atlanta, where he knew no one and had the respect that comes with being a star. He fled because he recognized the crab mentality the moment he began to get some. As he stated in that timeless interview with Vlad, his own homies had become hypnotized with hatred. The same homies that had supported him when he had nothing. It didn't even matter that he wanted or tried to help them. What mattered was that he had found success and they hadn't.
And them be the people in your own city who develop the envy for you. You go somewhere else, man, you a star.
And that's why what happened with Nip was just tragic. Nip was a smart guy, so there is no way he didn't recognize that many of the homies around had that reductive mentality, but he also had a good heart. And there's nothing more volatile than a gangster with morals, because it's only a matter of time before you let go of the very principles that kept you alive when you were in the streets. Nip had legitimized himself. He wasn't playing to society's script. He was an entrepreneur, a successful one who had already started buying his block back and was giving back to his community. Nipsey hired ex-cons to work for him. He was interested in the youth in his neighborhood. He was even donating clothes and other stuff. He even wrote a letter to LAPD in an effort to bring the community together. It was insane the good that Nip was doing that even the cops were impressed. But peeps like Eric Holder probably didn't see any of the good he was doing. All he probably saw was a man who had more than him and wouldn't stop showing it off. Again, it's that crab mentality on full display, because Nip was just being Nip. He was just trying to get everyone out of the bucket. Well, you know what happened next. Witnesses at the scene of the tragic killing say that Nipsey and Eric were having what looked like a perfectly civil conversation in the parking lot of the strip mall that Nip owned. There were rumors in the neighborhood that Eric Holder was a snitch, and Nip had taken the time to confront and advise Eric about it. Knowing Nip and his tendency to watch out for everyone, he was probably telling Eric that because he cared and didn't want him to get hurt. But you can only control what you say, not how the other person receives it. And judging by what happened next, Nipsey's act of concern and kindness was probably the trigger that lit the fuse, because the killer would return to a friend's car and return moments later with a pistol in one hand and a revolver in another. Before the attack, Eric reportedly told Nipsey, "You're through." Then he shot at him with both guns at least 10 times. Again, I must say this for those in the back, this wasn't a gang hit. It was a byproduct of human nature and a chronic gangbanging culture. Eric himself confessed that it wasn't a premeditated hit. It happened on the spur of the moment, a split-second decision based on a personal beef that was largely one-sided until Eric decided to let out his venom on Nip in a hail of gunfire. And that's why, despite the fact Nipsey was doing good in the community, trying to buy the city back, and even gotten in really good terms with the city mayor, rappers like Boosie think it's the wrong move. In fact, they advocate leaving the city the moment you taste your first lick of success. In his interview with Vlad, he said, "I advise everybody once they get money, get out they city, because that's when the hatred gun comes." This sounds like common sense advice given the situation, but it's easier said than done. Not everyone can afford to leave their city when the first bank comes, because you must not forget that not everyone is an op. Many of the homies are true friends who give all of their support. So to suggest leaving all that to move to another city just because of some ops will sound crazy to most. It even sounds crazy to me, because it could very well mean the end of that rapper's career. And that's why most of them choose to stay. They mask it with the pride of "this is my home and no one's running me out of my own city." But if you really listen, it's the fear of change. And so they find themselves stuck with true homies and homie-looking vultures that would rejoice and feast on their dead bodies the first chance they get. Now, you can call cap on everything I've been saying all day. You can insist that you stay strapped 24/7, that no one's gonna catch you slipping. And I'll ask you, how are you gonna protect yourself from a bullet that gets shot in your back while you're driving your homies away from a crime scene? Because that's what happened to Earl Swavey. Or how about someone just hitting you up while you're sitting in your homie's car like Slim 400 did? Or are you gonna stay trapped in your house because of LA ops? Do you think that will keep you safe? It didn't keep Pop safe though, and he wasn't even born in LA. If LA born and bred become targets, imagine the fate of visiting rappers or those bold enough to make the move into the city. The ones who visit LA or choose to move tend to be more prone to violence than the born and bred, because they tend to be the ones caught slipping the most. And it's often not because of any fault of theirs. It's all just intel and a lack of basic understanding of the true nature of LA gangs. Because you see, the thing about gangs in LA that the uninitiated misunderstand is the senseless violence, so to speak. They think all the gangs are about are the drive-by shootings, the home invasions, and the robberies that many members carry out with impunity. Now, I'm not saying they are wrong. I'm saying that their understanding of the situation is incomplete, because if they were homegrown, they would be more aware of the machine that runs these gangs. They would know that many of these gangs are run like the mafia. They got seriously advanced knowledge of their territory, every player and non-player within it. And like I mentioned earlier, for many of these gangs, it's not just street level stuff. Their operations cut across the country, some international, and they are well organized.
First time I ever went to LA, I went out there to shoot the party video. Right. They knew what time I landed. They knew what hotel I was at. before I landed.
So it's not surprising that they know everyone's business within the LA radius. So any celebrity caught lacking within that radius becomes past tense faster than they can catch an Uber to ride out of town. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to Pop Smoke.
A rising star rapper from Brooklyn is shot dead during a break-in at home in California.
According to investigators, armed masked men broke into the Hollywood home where he was staying. Pop Smoke, whose real name is Bashar Jackson, was rushed to the hospital where he was pronounced dead.
TMZ reported that the incident took place after a late-night house party in a Hollywood Hills home. Around 4:30 a.m., a group of masked men barged in, shots were fired, and sadly, Pop Smoke lost his life in the scuffle. This happened on the 19th of February, 2020. If you're familiar with the tragedy, you know that earlier that day, Pop Smoke had made the fatal error of posting the address of the house he was staying in on his IG when he was showing off gift bags he received. Hours later, the tragedy happened. Pop Smoke was caught slipping in a city that takes no prisoners. And while Pop might have thought he was safe because he was in Beverly Hills, the Boujay part of town, it turned out it wasn't. And this was just another error that LA newcomers tend to make. Now, you must know that I'm not blaming the dead, and I'm not saying Pop was slow. I mean, the man was brought up in Brooklyn. That's not enviable by any stretch, but money came to him fast and he got caught in that dreadful game of showing off bands on social media. Now, if it was his city, he would have probably been safe, but this was LA, and despite the fact he was in the hills, he wasn't clear from becoming a target. I mean, take a look at this map again. It's a color-coded map of many of the gangs in the LA region, the areas they control and the areas they don't. Do you spot Beverly Hills in the top left corner of the map, just under West Hollywood? All it takes for these gangsters is a drive, a short 20-minute drive to catch you slipping wherever the hell you are. Whether it's the lofty heights of Beverly Hills or the backwater channels of Inglewood, if you don't lay low, if you do not know where and where not to go, you are playing a dangerous game that could lead to your demise. And unfortunately, that's what another rapper who came visiting had to learn in the toughest possible way.
LAPD investigators have identified Freddie Lee Trone as the suspect in the shooting death of a rapper in South LA, and now police are searching for him. PNB Rock was murdered on September 12th. Police say he and his girlfriend were having lunch at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles when Trone entered the restaurant. He allegedly approached the rapper, and that's when investigators say he shot the artist and stole some of his property before taking off.
PNB Rock was targeted by this scumbag who got his 17-year-old son to rob and shoot the rapper after they stumbled on his location by chance. And probably what's even more frustrating is the fact PNB Rock had been very deliberate about avoiding this exact scenario his whole life. In an interview with Academics, he talked about how he had actively avoided certain places like nightclubs, where he believed individuals involved in the gangster lifestyle might see him as a potential game. Unfortunately, when he would be caught slipping, it was in one of such places where he probably didn't know that gangsters were, because that's how crazy it can be. You could decide to avoid trouble in LA and it would still come for you. That's why those in the know, the ones who are street smart in the City of Angels, advocate for anyone with plans of visiting to check in.
Not what it looks like. It's very deceiving. People like, well, I don't check in. I check in.
Yeah.
I'm from here. Yeah. When I'm coming in, and I call the homies like, I'm about to touch down. We pulling up.
Checking in is its literal meaning. Before you arrive in the city, let those who own the city know you're coming. That's the only way they can ensure your safety, inform others that you shouldn't be touched, and inform you of blocks you should avoid like the plague. And you must know no one's above checking in. I mean, you just saw an Ice-T, an OG born and bred in LA, confirm that he checks in, so what's your excuse? Call it whatever you want. But those who like to remain on top of the ground and not 6 feet under it, understand that it is just street etiquette. It's also your way of saying that, hey, I'm here and I'm not causing any trouble. Now that that's been established, I'm gonna play the devil's advocate, circle back and just say for the record, checking in does not guarantee you won't be a target. It's a preventive measure, all right, but a preventive method against a virus that can mutate. And when it does mutate, you gotta rely on your own background and street smarts. This is why I don't blame folks that don't subscribe to the checking in protocol, because the truth is, more often than not, the entire process is often just a means of extortion from the same people you're reaching out to protect you. Call it a checking in fee, if you will. It's the oldest trick in the book, and it is probably why America's first designated snitch caused a lot of trouble back in 2016 when he refused to check in while he was in LA for an NBA All-Star weekend. He's not the only one, though. There have been a handful of other players in the culture that have rebelled against the checking in policy. Charleston White, a former teenage gang leader who now helps young people to get out of gangs, is one of them. In an interview he did a while back, he not only shared his disdain for the policy, he also gave a solution for the city's problem.
LA is known for killing rappers. Rappers should run from LA. LA been extorting rappers since forever. Since they used to have concerts at the Forum in Inglewood.
It's like we are going in circles back to the same solution that Boosie said earlier in this video. Rappers should run from Los Angeles. It's a rich statement to make if you can afford it. But the truth is, most of the homies can't leave the hood for reasons we've already explained. So there has to be another way, right? If the situation is getting worse, if gang violence keeps taking out more and more rappers, someone should have a solution somewhere, right? Well, it ain't that simple, because to stop the killings, you will have to get rid of gangs in LA. And frankly, if you know anything about the politics of the city, I wouldn't blame you if you thought it was impossible.
Yeah, crime is going to get higher. And as you can see, crime in LA is going through the roof.
Why do you think that's happening?
The reason that it's gone up so much is because of the policies that California has happened. The gang situation is something that will continue to go as long as there's drugs and politicians thinking they can hug themselves out of that situation. The reality of it is that some people do need to be locked up.
If you enjoyed this expose, click on a video on your screen to watch even more interesting mini documentaries like this one, and I'll see you there.